All right, what's up, everybody? You notice that we're a little mixed up today.
We got studio takeover going on here. I
Yeah,
like this.
we got a Tampa Phoenix takeover in Alton while I'm up here in Aliquippa. So we've switched places. John and Lance are spending some time with our team in Alton, and then they're heading up to Kansas City to work with some faith communities there also. But we
We got guy
decided
ring
to
tonight
jump
too, I
in
think.
on a pod together. Joel and I are doing an event together here in Aliquippa with some amazing leaders in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
You might want to share a little bit about that, but mostly we want to talk today about if you've read the book or you've heard us talk about being a neo-monastic order, communities of desire. That's really important to us. It's a valuable framework for how we see life together, not just locally, but translocally too. So Joel has kind of been our teacher in this because he learned from better teachers than him. And we're trying to frame a lot of who we are and what we do around this idea. So that's what we're going to talk about
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to Alton, boys.
Yeah. Thank you. Great to be digging it. This place is awesome.
How's the coffee?
It don't suck. It don't
Okay.
suck.
Awesome.
I really let Taylor down this morning because I've been trying to drink less coffee for some like health reasons. And
This
so
is not healthy.
wait, so I'm drinking, have you seen that mushroom coffee stuff that it
What is
has
wrong with you? Yeah.
that's all I had at the
It's
house
called
today.
it's called psychedelic coffee.
Hey, it's helping. It's making me feel better. All right.
He didn't let me down though because there's a great coffee shop
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
gave me an excuse to go and do one of my favorite things, visit
Yeah.
local
In one of the
cafes.
towns that we're dreaming about some stuff in. So, yeah, talking about this community of desire thing, I'll just maybe set this up a little bit. I started really finding language for this when I was exploring some concepts, thoughts from the social philosopher Rene Girard. I know some of you have, explored and read him, some French guy. He had this
So much.
concept
Yeah.
called mimetic desire, to kind of explain the social psychology of groups and how groups begin to desire things. Now, some of that can
Which
really,
kind of comes from the word mimic, right?
that's right, mimic, yeah. So some of that can take on a really dark tone, so think about like riots, or
Mob mentality.
mob mentality, right? Um, but this is something,
Which is in a sense what we're saying. Like we're trying to form a
well,
mob.
so this is part of Rene Girard's thought, is that it's not that propensity for people to begin to desire the same thing as a group is necessarily bad. I think our inclination as Americans is to think it is because we're so individualistic. We so distrust, the thought of desire taking over a group of people. But he would also contend that there is such a thing as virtuous desire. And is it possible for a group of people to begin to want the same thing, right? So there's a good side to this as well, for a group of people to want something good. Um, this got me thinking about how, I think large segments of the church as we know it in the time in which we live is kind of hooked on what I would call like visionary leadership, like the leader or small group of leaders that has a vision, and then this is the compelling animating force behind calling people to something, motivating them to be involved in that vision, raising money.
So it get an image in your mind of we're combating a triangle form of community to a circle.
That's right.
Maybe is
Yeah,
that
yeah, I think so. But also, I think we live in a time where people are really burnt out on visionary leadership. I mean, there's a real distrust of it for a
Mhm.
bunch of reasons. And maybe we should have always been distrustful of it some, but it does seem like the moment is kind of ripe. Like people aren't buying it anymore, you know?
Mhm.
So even our most effective politicians, by effective, I don't mean actually doing anything good for the world. I just mean
Just
getting,
compelling and
yeah,
drawing.
just
Yeah.
getting elected, motivating people. If you pay attention, they don't have any vision, you know? What they're doing is stirring up people's desires, right? And maybe even some dark desires, right? And
Mostly, yeah.
yeah, and causing that to move people. But on the virtuous side of that, it really made me think about the community of celebration, this group of Benedictines that I've lived with, you know, for the last number of years. Their monastic way of life, their neo-monastic way of life. I mean, they're not like a traditional order, but they're living in this Benedictine ethos. And I've watched them live out their lives among the poor in prayer, starting new things for 20 years. They've done so much on one hand. Like, listen to this. I think this paradox is important. It's like they've accomplished so much over the course of their community life, their individual lives. Also, I think if you were to ask them, what's your vision, you know, for this ministry, for their lives, I think it's like that question wouldn't even make sense to them. It's like, what do you mean? Like there's no like strategic plan here for a monastic order, you know? It's like, but what I do think they would really be able to articulate is what they want together, you know? They'd be able to articulate their desires, which I think are really simple but profound. They desire prayer, they desire radical community, they desire the Sermon on the Mount, they desire Jesus, they desire the poor. You know, it's just some like really basic things. Work, you know, they
So
desire
how
their
is that different? Help us understand, or let's talk about how that's different from being a visionary leader that kind of the inception idea, like that just implants vision into other people. Like this is
mm-hmm,
our vision.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's certainly overlap, I think, right, between vision and desire. I mean, if I think even a good visionary is gonna hopefully articulate some underlying desires to that vision, right?
And a lot of times that's what draws people to
I
their
think so.
leadership is they're like, well, I desire what his vision is,
Yeah,
so I'm just going to go there.
yeah, that's right.
But it's
Sounds like the focus becomes less about what the main leaders envisioning and more about empowering people to jump into their stream of
Yeah.
desire and will. And this is funny you guys bring this up because yesterday I asked John about Well Built. I was like, is there like a marketing plan? Is there like, do you guys have any, is anybody trying to grow this thing or do this thing? And he's like, huh? I
It was weird. I was like, I don't even know. I was like, I understand the words you're saying, but like, I was like, we do this
well
so we can
built
do
is
the Earn a Bike
one
program.
of John's
Like,
businesses,
Yeah, just
what?
the bike shop, right?
Yeah, well-built bikes, but his thing
Or the
was
bike
actually just want to get bikes to people, and that's really the only thing. And it's kind of checking that box. So I don't really need it to be more than that. But I think there's a piece of this to make it land with people that are listening. A lot of the people that we meet with when we done the thing in Aliquippa or in Phoenix or wherever we go and do this stuff, a lot of people are looking for answers. They're still in the system of saying, well, what do I do next? And there's a pressure, there's some sort of pressure behind them that says, like, oh, I have to succeed, or we have to grow this thing, or we have to feed whatever this maybe vision led thing is. And I think what you guys are doing is in talking about, and especially in the book, is kind of unpacking and unraveling some of that and helping reframe it into the desires of the people. Is any of that land with what we're talking about?
Interestingly, in my mind, like, I don't know, like, I feel like another conversation or thing that comes up a lot among us is like the idea between like, and I feel like this overlaps between process and outcome, where we're not oriented around what this. So even the bike shop, like, I was like, I didn't actually expect it to be here this long, and I'm kind of surprised it still exists, and that's cool. And I wonder if it will next year. Like it's cool that we're doing it, but it's actually like the process that it's like, this is cool for as long as we're able to do it. It's like a gift to be able to participate in this work or in this process without a lot of orientation around outcome, which I don't know, but that feels like pretty connected to when I think about the community of desire, it's a state of being. Like
Yeah.
we're like it's presence. Like we want to do this. We're doing the thing we want to be doing. Like the means and the ends get conflated. The means are the ends. They're contained within the means or whatever. Like we're
Yeah.
doing the Sermon on the Mount. We're practicing that. Like
Yeah.
right now, we're leaning into that. And we're not oriented around what comes of it. But things will come of it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think that, orienting around a set of virtuous desires uh, has the ability to anchor a community of people for the long haul. This is what I've seen in celebration. Even if the strategy or the activities or the outcomes change, even if there's an ebb and flow to the community, even if it's like a space that you can live in,
Yeah.
even if the vision pieces, the strategic pieces are faltering, like you can
When
still.
on the flip side, like people that orient around outcomes and like outcome orientation or the vision or whatever, like I've seen over time a lot of what I would refer to as burnout has to do with the need for notches in a belt or fruit or seeing something come of it. Like
We're gonna
somehow there's like, oh, it's all for naught. And it's like, well, you were doing this for some like it can't be attached to a
right,
if then kind of thing, or like you're doomed
right.
Mhm.
like from the jump.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a marriage relationship, and if your desire is um, to be together and to work on inspiring things together and to have conversation together and to raise kids together, then
Yeah,
it's sort of hard to fail.
right.
I've felt for a while now that the word failure might not be a kingdom word, but
Hmm.
rather the word adversity. Like you experience adversity in the process. You
You can
experience
go through hell together.
Go
Yeah,
through.
right.
That's
That's it.
right. That's right.
Right, right.
But if your goal is outcome, it's like I want our kids to get to this place. I want to get this type of house. I want us to both drive these cars. I want us to make this much joint income every month. We would need to live in this neighborhood. Then I think you're going to set yourself up for what we would call failure.
Yeah, then failure is a
So
real thing.
if somebody's listening to this, then it's like if they can ask themselves, like if people stopped showing up to whatever it is that we're doing, or if it didn't pay my job, would I still be working on this? Would I still be committed to this?
Yeah.
We have like a network of missional communities in our ecosystem. And I hear the leaders a lot of times get discouraged, like, oh man, nobody showed up this 1 week. And so they feel like throwing their hands up. And I'm like, or only one person showed up. And I'm like, well, it's not about growing it into some big thing. Like,
Right.
I actually celebrate when there's only one person there. Whoa, like we got to have some intentional time and let go of those
Yeah.
outcomes, like
No,
we,
this is great. I actually feel like we have at least come to one kind of Roman numeral.
Yep.
So desire and vision, because that was my first question, is how
Right,
do we
right.
even explain this? Vision, if you really think about it, vision almost always tends to hinge on outcome,
Totally.
whereas desire almost always tends to hinge on process.
That's right.
And
That's
so
good.
the way that we're trying to frame this for you guys and for us is you've heard us say it before, but fall in love with the process, not the outcome, is that's what defines a community of desire is we love. Let's talk about some of like we love providing bikes for people who need transportation. We love the process of relationship with the fatherless. We have a deep desire as a community um, to be light in the darkness, like to be hope in the most hopeless places. when you list out these desires, I think if you're mature and methodical in how you architect them, they should my encouragement, my coaching for leaders would be steer clear of outcomes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
You know what I'm thinking about is how if there's an orientation around outcomes, and I think we could qualify this a little bit because even in our meeting prior to this, we are talking about some strategic planning for Brave Cities. So just to be clear, we're not saying no planning, no strategy, but I like the way you're saying it, John, an orientation, like what are we oriented around? I think when we're oriented around visionary outcomes instead of virtuous desires, this is where the powers can really tempt people
Yep.
into some dark places because they offer some things to those outcomes,
And those
money,
ends justify the
money,
means.
yes. And then before you know it, we've departed our virtuous desires to achieve some outcomes. Quick story from the community celebration that I'm thinking of sitting here in this conversation that I just so respect them for this. But the origins of their story were in the Jesus People movement, right?
Yep.
If you know anything about the history of that kind of revival that happened in the 60s, um, you know that music played a big part in it, like the creation of music. And so these older guys that hang around are musicians. They've composed a lot of music, they have just done some really beautiful art, as part of what the Spirit was, birthing in them in those years. But they would say that for a while there in the Jesus People movement, this is how I've heard them describe it. It's like the songs belong to the Spirit and to no one else, that were being written. This is in the charismatic renewal too. So some of these songs are emerging like spontaneously in their gatherings, right? And there was this real sense that the Spirit was the only one who owned these songs. Right? However, in their estimation, a big thing that changed the Jesus People movement was the passage of copyright laws in the United States in the same
In a
period of
negative
time.
way.
Yes, they think it like contributed to the death of the revival because, and this is not a statement on the merits of copyright law and artists getting paid for their work. Like I understand this is a complex issue. Nonetheless, it is an example of Babylon trying to solve something, right? And all of a sudden, people could make music and get
Own
paid
it
for
and
it,
get
own it and get paid for it,
royalties. Yeah.
royalties, and now there's money involved. And pretty quickly, there was a justification in people's minds like, oh, if we connect to this, we can actually have more impact. And of course, this is
Mhm.
like the birth of CCM and all that. And I
Mhm.
don't mean to put any of that down, but
It's
I'm just
just
saying,
more of an
yeah, I'm
example.
just saying
Yeah.
you can't look at CCM though, as we know it today, and look at the early Jesus People movement and call these even the same thing in ethos or anything, right? What
Right.
I so appreciate about celebration was when being rooted in desire, when those shifts started to happen and the temptation started to come, they were like, we need to orient around our desires again. They were kind of feeling like they were just being pushed into these concert tours and so that's when they got off the train. I mean, that's when they came to Aliquippa in the 80s. And that move was we got to orient around our desires again, which is the poor. And so we need to like radically move in with the poor again. They felt like they had drifted from that. I think that takes so much courage, over the long haul to say, hey, even when it looks like the outcome could be something great, something good, but it's pulling us away from just our core desires as a group of people. Yeah, we don't know what we should do with our music now, but we know we got to be around the poor,
Yeah.
Like we'll figure out the strategy from here as we go along,
Yeah.
but we got to get back to nearness to our
Yeah, I'm
desires.
thinking back to my illustration a minute ago of like the family and marriage and things like that. And you guys know that most marriage counselors would say that the majority of failed marriages are due to financial disagreements or something to do with the children. Of course, then you have like adultery and things like that, but they usually stream from something else, which I think is also a really interesting thought because when you think about the powers, I'm thinking about, we write about this in the book a lot, but there's a whole section dedicated to communities of desire. So, and we talk about the powers. I'm going to read this one section from the book, and then I'll finish that thought. But we reference an author who's influenced us named Walter Wink. We say Walter Wink, in his book, The Powers That Be, was known for talking about powers that wage war against God's people. He believed that spiritual formation was about resisting the powers. What we're talking about is the principalities and powers. I'm sure everybody knows that, who constantly try to pull you back into the Babylonian or empire pressures and pitfalls. Like walking up an escalator that is going down, he believed if you stop walking, you're going to go the way of the powers. Babylon is a magnet that our flesh is constantly being pulled into. So spiritual growth must be about finding a community that keeps you moving. We agree and believe, as Jesus did, that individual spirituality isn't enough to keep you moving against the escalator. So last sentence. So orderish life, I think I made that word up, but orderish life and finding friends that share your desire is a far better option, not only to keep you moving in the right direction, but the spiritual formation will tend to be far more transformative. So, like thinking about the marriage metaphor, if our desire is togetherness, is unity, is partnership, well, I mean, you gotta think like the only way to disrupt that is to disrupt the desire,
Right.
to change the desire.
Mm-hmm.
But if our desire is some type of outcome, I mean, it's a field day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What take your pick of what uh temptation, what distraction, what
Or
compromise.
even what hack, like what you're,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it's just, I just need this thing to happen, then what won't I do to accomplish that thing?
That's my point. Is okay, so now if this means me working long hours, not being
Yeah.
connected to my wife and kids, the end justifies the means.
Right. Right.
That's actually what I was getting at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And now we go, oh, wait a minute. Is this why we have compromised
Mm-hmm.
so much
Mm-hmm.
on, because our visionary leadership, which is outcome driven. I mean, y'all have heard the stories, but even the things we see now right in front of us of the ways that we will, um, you know, compromise certain virtues and values that we know Jesus taught us not to,
Mm-hmm.
because we go, but the end justifies the means.
You,
Right.
you know, when I may have shared this with you guys on here before, I don't remember, but when I was we spent some time in the Philippines with these Filipino leaders, and there was this kind of older leader in the Philippines. They do this like church planning in the slums there, incredible work. And he was talking through stuff, and he said this, and it just like rings in my head. He said the Protestant minister walks fast and the Catholic walks slow. He said because the Protestant minister always has somewhere to be and something to accomplish, and the Catholic priest is where God wants him. And now this guy wasn't Catholic necessarily, but it was an observation between like doing and being or something where he's like, by the way, like we can the one who's where God wants them can accomplish all kinds of things. But the state of being like because what he was speaking to is actually like a ministry of presence was what the discussion was actually.
Yeah.
But he's like, we're right where we're supposed to be. Like right here in and he's like, I have nowhere to be or nothing to like check off or accomplish. Anyway, it feels like that little story kind of maps really well to this. To just say like
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Does.
have a bit of like just this is it. This is the to be in the game is the aim.
Yeah.
So just to make this kind of orientation that we're talking about practical, for our, for folks who are listening, I'm just thinking about how, just as an example, how Taylor and I were at an event yesterday that was gathering some leaders in Pittsburgh with my denomination. And we were seeding some Brave City ideas, talking about things in this kind of framework, this ethos. Even for people who are beginning to, um, lean into this way of life or call others to this way of life. Um, I just want to like highlight something that was happening for me internally, and I bet for you too, Taylor. Like I've become more and more comfortable in these spaces, not feeling like I have to cast some great vision, even though people want that. Like sometimes they want that. It's like
Yeah.
sign me up, especially once they're bought in. Sign me up for the 5 things you want me to do.
Hmm.
But I think the more you live this kind of life, you start looking for something different in what you're inviting people to, or the kind of person that you're looking to invite. And it's not necessarily just the people that can serve a vision. I think there's a trap in that, by the way, because then we kind of get enamored just by people's skills, or ability or something.
Yep. They
Um,
become tools.
Tools, yeah, and then we start to see people along those lines
Yep.
how they can serve our vision.
Yep.
There is a
Right.
temptation there. Instead, and this was our kind of debrief conversation last night, like what we were talking about last night, maybe like 50 people at this event are the people who something happened to their eyes and their tone of voice, when we were talking about certain things. And maybe even after that happened, they kind of came alive in response to a set of virtuous desires that was presented to them. It's resonating with them. There might even still be in them well, what now? Like, what do I do now? And the invitation is actually just to be in that journey together. It's like, hey,
Mm.
I'll walk with you, you walk with me in this, and we want the same thing. We know that, maybe we don't know much else right now, but we know that. All that to say, if there's like a visionary orientation in a gathering like that, I think you're looking for a totally different kind of person, to invite. But I think when the orientation is around desire, you're just looking for the people who want the same things. And there's a sense that God's providence is at work there. It's like to discover, to me, one of the most exhilarating things is to discover in places, and I think we do this all the time, and as a Brave Cities team, but to discover people who want the same thing, before we even knew them,
Mhm.
before we didn't, there's just a resonance and desire. And it's like, oh, we can walk together now, because we want the same thing. I don't even know how we got here,
Yeah.
but somehow
It's
God,
a really cool, it's a really cool experience too. Like, and this isn't like even like a hack. It just really does occur to me, it occurs as though I didn't do anything. Like and what I mean by that is like if you have a vision, you talk, you get a bunch of people rallied around it, and you beat that drum all the time. You kind of like it's very clear you're like leading the way. But this other way that you're talking about, like finding people, it's like God already has stirred.
Yeah.
You're finding people that are already doing. It's almost like you find your kindred, and then in the end, you look around and all this stuff has gone on, but you're like, I didn't do it. Like it actually oddly separates you out from
right,
the. You can't even frame that in a way that
right,
like you like in terms of accomplishment or something like that.
right,
It's discovery and just like almost you could almost be just joyful and have gratitude of like,
right,
wow, there's more of us out here. Like
Right,
there's
right.
happening.
A lot of times when I talk, I bring up this psalm. When the Lord brought back the captives of Zion, we were like those who dream.
Hmm.
I think we could rephrase it as we were like those who desire. When when
Hmm.
you think about like if you just kind of do a quick thought experiment of 10 families that you know or Because I've been doing this while we're sitting here talking. I'm thinking, okay, these guys, these guys, these guys. And I'm going, oh, wait, like none of them live with desire. None of them, um, are we good? Okay.
Yeah.
We saw a thing pop up and we thought maybe the recording stopped.
It's good. It's a message from Zoom. I just need to make sure we were
This
good.
is our best podcast ever. So I'm like gonna be super pissed if it doesn't record. Um, I'll tell you the thought experiment I was having is recently I spoke with one of my great friends who, and I want to frame this the right way because I don't want it to sound like too big of a knock, but he was calling me to go, we're just gonna go back to church.
Mm,
And he was saying it in such a way of almost like we're giving up.
mhm.
Resigned.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna go back. And I think, and this was months ago, so we've kind of been talking. Bro, I'll tell you my response. My response was like, great, dude. I mean, I'm hoping you find like what you're looking for, a great community there. But as we've talked, what I've noticed in this journey is they've just resigned to not desire anymore.
Mm. It is. Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, because
They,
it is less
Well,
painful.
because it
right,
hurts. It
right.
hurts too much to
Yeah.
sit in. Yeah, no, totally. Like it's almost like, I don't know, what is that movie, Castaway? And like the dude's talking to a
Joel
volleyball.
wouldn't know, but go
I
ahead.
do know that movie.
Okay.
He's talking to talking to
Joel's
Wilson, the
like, I've never seen
volleyball,
it.
but like I
Hold on,
just
start
want
over. So
company.
start over. Castaway, what were you saying?
No, it's just very simple. It might not even be a good analogy, but I'm like, I just want company. The guy's talking to he puts a bloody handprint on a volleyball, names it Wilson because it says Wilson on it, and it's just talk. It's like his homie through the whole thing, and it's like because
Ideal.
there's such a need and desire there, huh?
My ideal friend.
But like to have desire in a place where that desire can't be is existential angst. It's just like to be like, I want kingdom, but I have a Sunday service or like, and to sit with that and not like,
Yeah.
you almost have, the whole take every thought captive and make it obedient. You almost have to take kingdom desire captive and repress it to be okay.
Yeah. Shut it away. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this Lance, you were talking about this just before we actually started the podcast, but Lance has been connecting with a lot of communities around the country that want to be connected to us somehow.
Mhm.
And they're sort of saying, and I'd like for you to reflect on this a little bit, but they're sort of saying, like, what does that look like? Do we just join the Brave Cities network, or do we give 10% to Brave Cities? Which, yes, you do.
Yeah. Like,
Right away. Make
Great
it,
idea. All of a sudden, we really believe
Yeah.
in tithing.
yeah, make it out to Taylor McCall.
Yeah, I think
But the idea, the reason this
Yeah.
feeling is so strong, and the reason I brought up my friend is because it might be the worst experience to carry desire alone, to feel like and this is why they said we've resigned, we're just going to go back, which I think is understandable, because they're saying we don't want to be living an outcome based spiritual life and experiencing failure and loss all the time is actually better than carrying desire alone for us.
Yes.
And so we don't know where to go or what to do or people to be with.
Mhm.
So we're just going to resign to this. And I think this is where we're coming, Lance, with that question that you've been asking yourself and others, is like, what does it look like? Is we're building not just a local, but a global community of desire.
Yeah. I was, and I think this is probably one of the most significant things we can offer each other and other communities. And we are doing some planning around that. We're trying to figure out how to offer that, in a way that makes
well,
sense.
you still got to write the song, right? Like we still have to write the
Yeah.
album. There's
Yeah,
a lot of
it's like this isn't anti-planning, it's orientation. It's like what But to give an example from yesterday, you know, there was one guy there, a young guy, who's from a town a couple hours north of where I'm at, and he's right now he's attending a Russian speaking church in his town. His parents are immigrants. Um, and he's really started to live around the poor in his community. It's like a whole story. But he was one of the guys that the way he kept interacting with us
Mm-hmm.
was just like, I want that. Like, I don't even know if I completely understand it, but I want that. My kind of intuitive response to that was, hey, next weekend, drive down to our house. We have a guest house on our property. Like, you can spend the night, just hang out with me in Chelsea. I'll introduce you to some people. But I think this is what we mean by invitation and stepping into desire together. I don't have a strategic plan to lay out for him, and I'm not even sure that he's at that point yet. Like, there's still some formation of desire happening in him. He's a young leader, but it's like, hey, you don't got to do this alone. Like, let's at least step into the same desires together, you know? And I'm confident that if we do that, with God leading us, with God as our helper, it's like I'm confident we some things will emerge from that. You know, we will write some things down. There will be some plans, but if those plans fail or change, our desires won't, because this deep thing has been cultivated in our souls. And I think sometimes we think we can only meet other people in a visionary space, or that, especially as leaders, I think sometimes we really feel that pressure. It's like people aren't going to want to be part of this unless there's a vision and they know the role. But I think there's something really compelling about inviting people to the kind of desires that they would even die for, you
This is
know?
this is what I think was the most frustrate. This is what I think frustrated the people that follow Jesus the most
hmm
is they wanted vision, and he
Isn't
only
it
gave
time for
them
the
desire.
kingdom?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
No, think about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm,
challenge this, listeners, you guys, whoever, but you'd be hard pressed to find like a clear vision from Jesus.
even after his resurrection, when will the kingdom be restored to Israel? Is the
Hmm.
question they're asking, before
Hmm.
his ascension. It's like, when is this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
One of our
Yeah.
talks this weekend, guys, was we kind of reoriented the Great Commission, and we'll let y'all talk. 'Cause we're talking too much, but we reoriented the Great Commission. We flipped it because we feel like in our Western outcome culture, okay, so outcome driven ministry, we focus on which part of the Great Commission? Go and make disciples. But I actually think that's irrelevant. I actually think the relevant part of the Great Commission is teach them all the things that I taught you. If I could rephrase the Great Commission, it would be go and teach them all the things that I taught you, which is kingdom desire, and disciples will be made.
Mhm.
You don't have to worry about the outcome. I'll handle the outcome. You just carry the desire. Lindsay and I decided 12 years ago that we were going to practice this in our home, that we were never going to teach our kids to make disciples. Maybe this sounds like semantics to people, but if you listen to this whole podcast, it makes sense. We're not going to teach them to make disciples. We're going to teach them the kingdom. And let's see what happens. And what we have seen is natural disciple making happening through their lives.
Mhm.
You know,
Go
it's
ahead.
funny. I just in that frame, I actually had a very explicit thing with myself. It had nothing to do with raising kids or making disciples or anything, but like it was just a very clear like being taking Jesus seriously as a disciple, like being a disciple is going to take everything I have, all of my time and attention, and I'm going to just struggle and fail and whatever. So like the like telling other people something to do is going to be outside of my for the foreseeable future outside of my capacity because I don't know I can't do this personally, right? Like the log in my own eye is so great that I can't see the specks around me. And so I just don't have it in me. And I just gave myself permission to like never worry about that again. And like but it almost maps. It was like another way to like the same kind of like position where it's like, just worry about you, try really hard to do that. And then just be so engaged in the game. And then like, oh, by the way, things happen around you. And then you're just like, that's awesome. Cool. Like think, God can do whatever God wants with our lives kind of through that. But we can kind of like, I don't know, let it go or hold that with an open hand. It interestingly like kind of maps to that thing you're saying with the kids where it's like we
Mm-hmm.
don't need to aim at it.
Yeah, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, this was pretty good.
This
Yeah.
is this was fun. This
I
is
don't know what
good.
we're gonna call it, but I think it's something to do with community of outcome versus community of desire. And
Yeah.
Lance, I think that can even with you give you some language as you help us architect or we all architect what a larger network looks like.
Yeah.
I am, by the way, like just talking about that. I'm curious, like example wise, like, you know, are there things that you would point to that exist that, there's things that come to mind. So one thing that comes to mind is like 12 steps, right? Where you have like the AA stuff where it's like this movement that has this, there is no lead, there is no org, there is no leader, there is no centralized thing. It just happens all over because people desire sobriety. They gather around these principles, and it's just this completely like autonomous network that to me is the most mind-blowing thing that's ever existed. Like, how could that be? And then the other thing I was, then I like think about like Catholic workers over time, where it's like those are just these autonomous, like you could literally just start one up. It's like these are the principles of it. We just kind of start this thing up. Versus like within a monastic order, there's a clear rule. We orient ourselves around like a code of ethics or a certain way of living or whatever. Like, I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts in terms of, and I know this is like going to be ongoing conversation, but like, are there things you would point to where you're like, this might work for, because like we're finding people around the nation. We're like, oh, we're like, it's like finding each other. Like, just like we were talking about the relationships, like even each other, we found each other and it was like, what a gift
Yeah.
this is to know you're not on your own out here. And there's someone we're around the country and God's kind of doing this thing. And like, kind of like finding your kindred and your family is a really good thing. And like, I don't know, just curious if you guys have thoughts of like what you've seen or inclinations of what even that might look like.
John, I think you gave just two really great examples. I mean, honestly, like the whole 12 step thing, it's so great you brought that into this conversation because what you won't find,
Which is AA,
yeah,
Alcoholics
right.
Anonymous. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Or
or the
any
other
anon.
NA
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But what you won't find in AA is we're going to start 100 AA groups this year. You know what I mean?
never. No, and like no one's trying. And then there's people like
Right.
driving through rain and snow to go to some
But
church
what they
piece
have done is codified. There is a book,
principles.
right? There's a blue book, right?
There's the 12 principles, there's the
Oh,
12
yeah.
steps and the
And
traditions.
they've codified their desires, their way of entering into those desires together, the way to talk about their desires together. I think there's actually something very similar in monastic life. Like I would nuance a bit of what you said. I don't know that the rule, even though it's very action oriented, most monastic orders have some kind of rule of life, that they're living
Yeah.
around. I actually I don't see it so much as a code of ethics, even though it is a way of life. So there is something ethical about it. It has to do with right action and right living. But I actually think it's codified desire, like it's an expression of desire. Like the rule of life is aimed around the poor, stability, work, like
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
statements of desire. Now it's got to be fleshed out how we live that together for this season.
Yeah.
It's going to be true of Brave Cities too. Again, we're not saying don't write things down, don't plan, don't. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying to
We're
be.
just saying all this is an excuse that we never we didn't do the
I think
work.
I think
Yeah, that's right.
I think the
We're
most
just saying, at
valuable
least I want the right things. But
the
what we
reason
are saying is let desire lead that, right? And if the actions get out of step with the desire, get rid of the actions, and remake that along the lines of virtuous wanting, you know. So
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
Mhm.
Until next time.
Yeah,
All
man.
right.